What's up, everyone? This episode of the podcast is a collaborative educational series between myself, ArizonaNORML, and Nick Gasman with CannaEd. This inaugural episode is going to cover such topics such as dosing, the entourage effect, as well as methods of ingestion. Please stay tuned. Do me a favor, if you're getting anything positive out of this, like, comment, and subscribe, and I hope we all learn something together. Cheers. What's going on, everybody? This is AJ with the Blue to Green podcast, and sitting down here today with me is a Mr. Nick Gasman.
Hello. So I do have a business, Growth and Success Solutions. So
very nice. Yeah. And you do video, create content.
Correct. Yeah, for content creation. Yeah.
And now you are assisting ArizonaNORML as far as education.
I'm partnering with them essentially. Yeah, I've been doing cannabis education for now about 2 or 3 years.
Awesome.
And most recently, since moving back from Washington to Arizona, just wanted to partner with an organization who has that credibility on the political side, on the social side in the state. And I felt that ArizonaNORML would be just a great partnership because of the people who run it. I feel like they have a good direction. They understand the importance of education, not just for our state, but for multiple states who are going to be entering into the cannabis world. So, yeah, I just wanted to partner with them. And it's been great so far.
Nice.
We started CannaEd now, 10 episodes in. So
very cool.
It's going to keep going from here.
And also with us is Janae Nichols, who is a director of
public relations, but honestly, I like to do a lot of different things, help out where I can. I think we're all volunteers, and that's a beautiful thing about
with ArizonaNORML.
Yeah.
So and I'm the secretary for ArizonaNORML. And so what we were doing here is, like, as Nick explained, he's doing Canna education for the beginners, for people who don't know that, and what the premise of this podcast is going to be is a long form content, taking the short form stuff that you've done over the last few months or whatever it is.
Correct.
And we're going to turn that into a bit more longer of content. And we're going to have links to descriptions to videos so that you can learn more in depth about the endocannabinoid system or the entourage effect instead of these other topics that we're going to cover. So, and part of that, the really cool thing that, like, so Janae and I being with the organization that we're with, we love, and this was an awesome brainchild of, I don't know who did it. I've been stepped back for a while, but I don't know who came up with it to introduce you to the mix, to create these awesome, well-spoken, thought-out educational videos to help educate the community out there who don't know about cannabis,
right? Who
don't understand or know about all the different things and the benefits that it has. So, and that's where we brought you into it.
Right, exactly. And I reached out to John, actually, because I've known John for a little bit. I saw him at events when I used to work for Item 9. When I worked for the Mint, I also used to go to events, and I ran into him a few times, and I reached out to him and asked him about creating something that would be beneficial for the audience that we're trying to look for, which are people who just want to know a little bit more about cannabis and how that can affect their daily or overall experience. And he was on board with it. He talked to the board and we connected, and we're able to produce what will soon be more episodes of this educational series. So
very cool. Yeah. And here we are.
Okay.
And we'll bring Janae into it and talk about the community partnerships and how the outreach and how that all went down.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I mean, like you said, he met John and a domino fell into how can we just get this out on social and start to educate the general public, which I think is super, super important. I was really drawn to NORML's idea of advocacy in the community and consumers. I think that's what we really need in this industry, is education at the baseline level to understand when you walk into a dispensary, what is THC, how does it interact with your brain, how does the chemicals work, and that baseline information I think opens a lot of doors to people's guarded off ideas of the plant itself. So I think that's what we've really built here, and as the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, it's a mouthful, but that's really what we're doing, and it's related to education, which will soon turn to education on bills, lobbying, how to get involved. But I think starting from the foundation is super important. So that's really where we're heading.
That's one of the things, and I'm not going to take up too much time doing this, but that's been the most fun part for me is the advocacy part of the getting out there and trying to get people mobilized. That's been the most difficult part. The most difficult part is to explain to the cannabis community that, hey, look, man, you like your cannabis, you like your medicine, but guess what? Every year, tens of people in the state of Arizona, tens of thousands, or I wouldn't say thousands, but hundreds of people are trying to take that away from us. They're trying to strip away our rights to have cannabis, plant-based medicine, and to get out there and say the thing that matters the most are numbers, are the number of people to get out and advocate and say, hey, look, leave the people alone.
Yeah.
You know, that's been the most difficult part, is because everybody just gets very comfortable sitting in their homes and enjoying it and not understanding the backside that is ArizonaNORML, and that is the advocacy, and that is the community outreach. So this is why community partnerships like this are amazing and awesome, to get and to explain how we need to get mobilized.
Right. Absolutely. And it's always going to be a fight, even after things are, legalized to some extent. Like you said, there are people who are, still essentially trying to take away what we have built. And we want to be able to educate people so that they're aware and how they can be involved and how they can put their footprint, into something that we all want, essentially. So, yeah, I agree.
And I think a lot of it has to do with education.
Yep.
Not understanding.
Yep.
Having that stigma, not understanding the benefits of it. I would love to sit down one day with a hardline a prohibitionist and just be like, look, man, I've been there, done that. We've tried this route and it didn't work. So, and I would love to have that conversation with someone. So, but on the educational part of it, that's what we're doing here, is breaking down the further things. So for this episode, we're going to keep it right around an hour, and we're going to start breaking down the first of 5 of all of the different things that we've covered in CannaEd. So if we can just dive into whatever our first topic is going to be.
So the first topic that I think essentially needs to be explained to everyone is the endocannabinoid system, just because that's where it starts. Every animal, every person has an endocannabinoid system. Every person innately has the ability to receive benefits from cannabinoids. And of course, in the beginning, I know that could be difficult to understand, because, what is an endocannabinoid? Right. What is the system? It very much is similar to what you think of when you think of like a nervous system. It's just something that is part of your body that allows you to receive and react to whatever substance that is. And so, talking about the endocannabinoid system, we want to be clear that everyone understands every time that you use cannabis, any time that you interact with cannabis in any substance, any form, any consistency, you are bound to have a reaction.
Exactly.
You're bound to have reaction. So even if it's just a small amount, even if it's a large amount, you're bound to have reaction, because this system is in place, and it's obviously something that cannot change. And so that's why dosing is so important.
Right.
I think that's why in Canna Education, in CannaEd, we've tried so hard to explain why dosing is important, because we want people to be comfortable in their first experience. I think that's for any person who doesn't know about cannabis but wants to explore it. Like, is this something that's going to be uncomfortable for me? Is this something that's going to make me feel like I don't not feel good, essentially?
Right.
Like, and so we want to make sure that any person that encounters cannabis, that wants to try this for the first time, is going to have a good experience. And we start with the endocannabinoid system by understanding that. So
it's very well spoken. It's very much the mission that we're trying to reach. Is we talked off air that if people want to get stoned on the weekends, go for it. We are not against that. By all means, do that. Do it responsibly. Be smart. Just don't overdo it. Don't get in a car and drive. But we're really trying to touch those who are just ignorant in the subject because they just don't know. No, maybe not of their own fault, or they drank the Kool-Aid for 35 years or whatever the case may be. But we want to reach those people that want the education. And as I'm a medicinal patient, okay, I use it for medicinal purposes. I want to make sure that it's clean medicine and what it's doing to my body, and understand, and just like you said, no matter what you ingest, you will have a reaction. Yep. And part of the reaction is the good feeling. Exactly. It puts you in a better mood. Yeah. So when you're dealing with chronic pain, when you're dealing with nausea, when you're dealing with life and all that good stuff, it just puts you in a better mood, which is one of the reactions and one of the things that it's way better than any opioid, I could say. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just from like a personal story, like I think when I think about my first experience with cannabis, I was 16, Okay. Of course, it was recreation at the time. I was with my friends just trying to
experienced something new that they told me was really cool, and something I thought would be safe, because I wasn't a person who ever was attracted to drugs, or even when I was in high school. Like, I was very aware, like, that's not something I want to experience. But for some reason, weed felt a little bit different to me, and I'm just not sure why. So experiencing that first smoking experience, and then moving into a couple months in and realizing that when I'm feeling nauseous, that I'm smoking a little bit, and it's starting to help that. It's starting to change the way I'm feeling. And that was the first spark to me that allowed me to understand, well, hey, like, there's more to this than just getting high on a weekend. And so I started to, read about it. But of course, that was, 2010, and I was under 18. It wasn't something I could talk to anyone about, really. It was kind of something I had to put in the back of my mind.
And you grew up in Arizona, correct?
I did, correct. Yeah, so for the most part.
Back then, was your first time using it in Arizona?
It was, correct, yeah.
So we're talking back then, everything was felony.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, 2010 was when Arizona like first started like their medical. But
Yes.
I was 16. I mean, that was so like in its infancy. It almost didn't exist. But yeah, you're 100% right. That would have been a felony. That would have been jail time or something on my record for sure. But yeah, that was kind of my intro to understanding that cannabis could do more than just get people high, and not having any outlet or any resource to find like accurate education about that was, hard for me then, and translates, I feel like, into what I do now, just because, understanding even now with medical, even with, recreational legalization, dispensaries on every corner, doesn't necessarily mean that the education is transparent, that it's accurate, and we want to try to create a resource for people to find that accuracy.
Amen.
Yeah.
Like, seriously, amen. That's exactly it. It's trying to navigate through the sea of whatever MSO is trying to push their information.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I don't want to get too controversial.
Yeah, of course.
We're trying to bring people in. Sorry, this is not a normal podcast of mine. Sorry.
Of course. Sorry. Yeah. And so getting into that first topic, I think what we really want people to understand is that when we talk about cannabis helping certain things like, pain, anxiety, nausea, certain diseases it can help alleviate, right? Like when we talk about that, we don't say it to make you think that it's just something that we want you to just try, you know, like we don't want you to feel like we're selling you on cannabis. We're not like every other retail entity or business that's selling you, on cannabis. We're just doing this to tell you that this is something that can benefit you. And so that's why we want to try to provide like data and, studies and things that show you that, with their research, with their facts, these are some of the ways that cannabis has helped. And so when I was talking earlier about the endocannabinoid system, there was a study that I looked at here. And this study was talking about,
You're good.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
Cool. And this study was talking about how cannabis and cannabinoid receptors help alleviate certain types of pain that you can have. And so this is just an excerpt from that study, but it talks about regulation of receptors is also observed in the spinal cord. It was a study that was talking about how receptors in the spinal cord could help with nerve injury pain, essentially. So just essentially helping with alleviating any type of pain that a person can receive from nerve damage. It says these highlight the importance of the endocannabinoid system as a potential therapeutic target for treatment of both spinal cord injury and neuropathic pain. And so understanding that there are ways that cannabis can interact with your body and quite literally help with certain ailments, certain things that you can experience, I think is what we want people to try to receive and understand, despite the thoughts and despite the propaganda and despite the negatives. I think that's our hardest battle is fighting through the negatives to breach a light where all the positive can be seen and received appropriately.
And I think it's important to understand the potential the potential negative side effects. There are times in which it has been proven that, I mean, I'm not a denier in any way, shape, or form that I do think there are people that should not touch it. There are people who do have psychosis. There are people who do snap. There are people like this stuff does happen, and I'm not a denier or I'm not a downplayer. Like It happens. But they also, let's take a look at how much were they ingesting. They probably were, doing 100% THC crystals on a daily basis and stuff like that. And just,
And that's why dosing is so important.
Yes.
I think it goes back to the education. It's just like, if you're jumping in head first, like taking 100 milligram, you've never like edible or something, that's going to affect you in ways that could cause some trauma. Looking back, where do you want to go, and just going to dosing and the education, because like those resources need to be out there.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's a difficult part though, especially about edibles. Like when you eat the whole cookie and you're only supposed to take one.
Yeah, right.
Looking at somebody right now, 10 milligrams as opposed to 100 milligrams. Anyways, but it does have negative side effects. But to what medication doesn't have a negative side effect in the world? There are none. And I'll take cannabis that will make you go night-night for a little bit over something that could potentially kill you from overdosing.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, especially when you talk about edibles. I mean, one of the main videos I did was about overconsumption. And one of the things I talked about was that when you experience overconsumption, that the first thing that you should remember is that it is temporary. Like you said, the negative side effects are only temporary versus where some other medications or prescriptions could give you long-term or like even, some severe or fatal side effects, you know? And so you want to be aware of that. But yeah, of course, edibles are the first way that I think a lot of people assume that it's a way they want to try cannabis.
Yes.
Like I think for any like individual who doesn't use cannabis on a regular, they feel like edibles are great. And I think for some people just on a health on a health perspective, the idea of smoking, they don't want to encounter that. They don't want to encounter it's no different than cigarettes or vaping. They just don't like the idea of smoke going into their lungs. So
there are religious implications too.
Of course,
there are religions that will allow the use of medicinal cannabis. I mean, we live in Arizona. Arizona has a heavy Latter-day Saints. And they are, and I've read their book. They're allowed to ingest medicinal cannabis for medicinal purposes, but they cannot smoke or vape. So they can do tinctures, they can do oils, they can do edibles and all that stuff. So for all the Mormons out there that are listening, you can. Yeah, you can.
That's good to know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll be honest, I didn't know that, but I mean, I guess it makes a lot of sense for just people in general who don't want the unhealthy feeling of putting any type of smoke or whatever it is in their body. So what do? Normally you turn to edibles, which where we talked about is a dangerous slope to go down for any person. Any person who has taken too much of an edible, they will definitely understand it's a dangerous slope, and it's a slow burn up until that peak, and at that point, it doesn't feel good.
It does not.
No, it's nothing that you enjoy about it. Like, and that's what we don't want. That's we want people to stay away from that path.
We're laughing our asses off because we've all been there, done that, seen and tried it.
Yeah,
and we've ridden that purple dragon across our living room. It's terrible though. Like it's anxiety filled, and I personally get nauseated and sick. Yeah, and it's a terrible thing. So we're laughing because we understand at the end of the night you're not going to die.
Right.
Okay. Joe Rogan said it best. You're not going to die. You might think you're going to die, but you're not going to die. You're going to be fine. But it is an absolutely horrific experience, especially if it's your first time.
Yeah.
That's no introduction to medication.
That's a door in and a door out to me. Like, I feel like if a lot of people have negative experiences or things that they say about cannabis, it may have resulted in being, a case of overconsumption right off the bat in that first experience. You take an edible for your very first time using cannabis ever, and it makes you freak out completely. I would understand why that may not be something that you assume is good for you. And so, we want to try to prevent that as much as possible for anyone who is, looking to make that journey into the cannabis.
What would you recommend somebody's first edible dosage be?
That's always hard to say because it's based off 11-hydroxy-THC. 11-hydroxy-THC is processed in your liver, and the amount in which you process is what determines like the intensity of your effects. So it's hard to really say like what the proper dosage is, but I do tell people to gauge their effects. I think that's the biggest one is don't think that it's not working.
Right.
Don't think that just because you took 5 milligrams and I don't feel anything that I should just take another one in the next hour. Like that's where everyone goes wrong. And so I think just gauging your effects accurately after a few hours 3 to 4 hours, maybe, and then seeing where that takes you is the best solution. But that's all I can really say as far as like proper dosing. I would say is just take it slow.
I would say no more than 5 milligrams.
Oh, of course. Yeah, right. I mean,
no more than 5.
Yeah.
And I feel like most people, their general recommendation is that, like, take those mints that are like 2.5 milligrams and try that out for size before you go any further, and just understand that if that, takes you somewhere, that again, the feeling is just temporary. So,
and a method is like notating what you've taken, what are the effects. So I think you can, like, if you're a first time user and a smoker and you want to, a person who's ingesting cannabis, journal, put it on your notes app. What did you take? How are the effects? Really just like understand your body. I think that's really good about being intentional with how it's going to interact with you. And I think that's super important. And the education aspect of how is it going to interact and kind of easing that fear a little bit. Yeah. And that gap is huge.
I think one of the things that annoys me the most is that because of all of the roadblocks to test, and because of all the roadblocks, because it's still Schedule 1, because we can't get the data to say this component helps with headaches. I do not like the naming of cannabis when I walk into a dispensary. I'm a 42-year-old man. I don't want to buy Alaskan Thunderfuck.
Right.
I don't want to buy cat piss. You know what I mean? I want to buy bad back, you know what I mean? Right. Sore, achy muscles. Okay, so we know that these cannabinoids in this plant are associated with alleviating muscle tension or whatever the case is. Yeah. So, and again, I don't care if you want to get stoned and off of whatever, that's fine.
Right.
But again, I'm for intentional medicinal purposes. I don't like to be medicated on an opioid just to be medicated on an opioid. I don't want to be medicated on weed just to be medicated on weed. I want to be medicated for intention and purpose.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's just one of those things that annoys me as a grumpy old man. I wish it was a little more scientific or a little more.
Right. They're like writing on the back is like the terpenes are tiny. It's like it's the design, the logo. Like we could go into that, but like that's where the terpene profile and like the THC percentage becomes a huge component of understanding like how is this going to affect you. I think we had an episode of terpenes on how that was working and what that can interact with.
I did a quick video on terpenes, and a lot of the videos you'll see on CannaEd are pretty quick, just because I feel like in our digital age, right, like we don't have that attention span to really dive in all the time, so we want to just hit you with short and sweet information that you'll retain and be able to comprehend and understand and possibly use for later in your next experience. So that's kind of the idea, but yes, essentially, like, terpenes are what allow you to have the acute effects that you want. THC is what's going to get you high, is what's going to get you the psychoactive effects, but the inclusion of terpenes is what allows you to feel sleepy, to feel more energetic, to feel more focused, to feel more creative. These are the type of effects that you can have. I mean, they also help with the cannabinoid inclusion with pain and other ailments. That's like, for example, humulene. Humulene hops is a big terpene that helps with alleviation of pain. And so, like, that's the entourage effect. That's something that almost very few dispensaries would even mention or tell you. They're more or less just going to tell you about the THC percentage. They're not going to tell you about the entourage effect and how terpenes and the cannabinoid percentage work. Like, I don't think we've gotten there just yet.
Agreed.
But that's what I feel like since I've been in the industry and now, exited out, I don't have a cannabis job right now. I'm working for myself, creating this cannabis education.
You're not getting paid to do this.
No, correct. 100%.
But this is a job, and it's important, and it's community education. And working for a nonprofit, this is we don't get. I don't get paid a goddamn penny. So it's been several years, and I love it. I'm just joking. But this is a job. And this is. I think it's part of being a responsible consumer advocate.
100%, and I agree with you. I think it's a responsibility, and for me personally, it's a passion. I've always been passionate about educating people and helping people since I've been in the medical cannabis industry. Before things went recreational, that was the fulfillment that I got from it, was seeing people have these positive benefits and their quality of life improving from something that I gave them, and them coming back with their testimonies and their stories about how this helped them, and me understanding that. Also allowed me to understand that there's a gap between people who sell cannabis and people who know about cannabis. And so I felt like it was a duty for me to be able to close that gap in any way that I could. And I think I'm just still continuing on that journey, right?
That's awesome.
And so, like, exactly why I feel like creating something like CannaEd will help us help the audience essentially understand, what they want and how to get to this place if that's where they want to go. How to get from their house to the dispensary can be hard sometimes, and like you said earlier, it could be overwhelming. It could be difficult. If people are not taking the time to give you the correct information.
Right.
They just want to throw percentages. They want to throw names, strains, right? They want to throw, this is 98%. And, those types of things, they don't necessarily help like a first time user. They just overwhelms them, jumbles their brain, and then, they start getting things that are not helping them. And so, we want to be able to clear a little bit of that up,
And we're coming with receipts with this as well. We've got studies that we're going to put links to in the video. Correct. And all that and show and all
absolutely
and all that, so that we can help further people's understanding of what the endocannabinoid system is, what the entourage effect is. And if you could, we threw that word around. So what exactly is the entourage effect?
So the entourage effect, because it's hard for people to have been recognized, it's labeled a theory, but to me, I believe it's very much a fact. But it's the idea that terpenes, cannabinoids work together to create the effects that a person may have.
Okay.
And so when you think about the entourage effect, that includes not just THC, but it includes all the cannabinoids that are present in a cannabis. So it could be THC, THCV, THCA, CBN, CBG,
CBD.
Yeah, CBD, of course, obviously, and like all of those cannabinoids paired with terpenes like humulene, limonene, pinene, beta carrier or caryophyllene, eucalyptol, linalool. These are all terpenes that create different combinations of effects. And it's important for us to highlight that because these are the type of things that I think would serve much more benefit being on the back of a label than just,
Agreed.
A large THC percentage. Agreed. Or a large, CBD percentage. Like, don't get me wrong, CBD is great, but
yes.
But the others have yet to be highlighted and really studied like that. And especially like, put in the forefront of like retail cannabis, like very, very seldom now. I've seen some CBN tinctures and a couple like CBN, CBG gummies, CBG, some like 1-to-1-to-1. So there is some small exposure, but it's not enough. I think we need to do a better job of, explaining that other cannabinoids, other terpenes are involved. And that's essentially the entourage effect. It's just understanding how both of those work to create whatever effect it is that you're having, but also want.
Right.
Like that's, I think that's essential. Is what you want. And so,
And those different cannabinoids and those different terpenes and all that, just like every plant on the planet expresses all different ones. And it's not just all cannabis. It's this plant will have more of this plant will have more of that. And that's how you get the different effects and the different combinations.
Yep, 100%. I mean, the video that we created about terpenes, it highlights that I use limes for citrus. I use mangoes for myrcene. I use sage, I believe, for caryophyllene because it's more peppery. It has more of like a herby, profile, essentially. And so, understanding that it's not just in cannabis, but these are also terpenes that come from many other plants and herbs that exist on the world. So, it's just intertwining that reality, and I think people should understand that.
Like the pinene smells like pine.
Yes,
smells like pine needles. It's like the same thing in the pine tree in my backyard. It's in the cannabis plant.
Yep.
So it's just different expressions of the different oils and the different things and all that good stuff.
And that doesn't mean go out and like eat a pine.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that. Yeah. Don't like eat a pine thinking that's going to work. It's again, that's why we have to have both. Right. You can't just use terpenes without cannabinoids. You have to have cannabinoids, terpenes together. That's what creates those effects.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Don't go look at a pine tree. It's not a pleasant experience.
It's an interesting thing now seeing it, and I feel like we're gonna start breaking out not just more of the cannabis side, but how to like really interact as a customer in a retail facility, because that's something that I think does also need to be mentioned as well, is that sometimes customers don't understand or patients essentially in certain places. I know a lot of places don't have recreational cannabis just yet. So patients and then customers for their places that are legal, the etiquette that's involved with coming into a dispensary and knowing what you want or having an idea of what you're looking to receive and how to relay that properly to the person that's helping you, so that there's a fluid two-way communication. I think it is something that is important, because a lot of times where I think customers get bad purchases or customers get things that don't necessarily help them or just essentially isn't what they want, it's just because there's not a good communication between the person selling the item and the person buying the item. And we know like a buyer-seller relationship is important to, kind of get the product across. And so, I want to do just a couple videos within this series that just highlight ways that you can help your bud tender help you, if that makes sense. Yeah. Because I was a bud tender for 2 years. Okay. I think it was hard for me in the very beginning to understand like what a customer really wanted, but it might have also been because they didn't really know what they wanted, you know? So it was a little bit of both, but I felt like when I was able to gather more knowledge for myself and get more of the education that I needed, it was easier for me to understand how I could help that person. And our communication became better. And I noticed that customers kept getting better products because they would come back and tell me,
that's awesome,
what they got and how that helped them and how they're going to, wait for me going forward because I'm giving them the right advice and the right information. And I think it's huge being able to close that gap and, create a fluid level of communication between that customer or that patient who wants something that's going to help them and the person who's, behind the counter. So
I can speak from personal experience that I said I used a little bit, smoked a little bit in junior high and all that good stuff. But as an adult, when I was moving into the world of using it for back pain, again, I went from law enforcement and not using it to now I have serious back pain and I want to start using this. And I do remember that not having any understanding of what the entourage effect was. And I was using pens. I was just using the oil pens a lot. I personally don't like those. Right. I've never found one that I truly like, except for just a couple. And I don't want to do brands or anything. That's not the point of this podcast. But the better ones of the live hash rosin seem to be a little bit better. But then when I started and I switched over to flower, so like now I only use flower, it feels like a more complete medical journey. It feels like a more complete medication. And until you experience this, it sounds woo-woo and it sounds like this is stupid. What is this guy? This guy's high now.
Of course.
So we may or may not have fulfilled our endocannabinoid system before filming. So, but it felt like a more complete thing. Like I got a longer lasting high. I got a longer lasting back relief. I got longer lasting, just a better overall feeling. And again, before understanding what the entourage effect was, I had no idea.
You had no idea. None. But it was subconsciously something helping you out.
Yes.
Because it's just like you said, the knowledge and the education wasn't there behind it, but behind the scenes, you were getting the desired effects from the inclusion of terpenes and cannabinoids and that. And I know like stigmas have a lot to do with this, right? Because vapes I feel like are more popular and more prevalent, no different than nicotine vapes for what? The smell, right?
Right.
We don't want to walk around smelling like weed. We don't want to walk around smelling like cigarettes. We don't want that look and that effect and that pressure, that that little bit of scrutiny you get for using something and someone's smelling you, the judgment essentially. We don't want that, right?
Yes.
So we use vapes, and the most common, the most cheap vape you'll find is like a distillate cart on the market. Distillate carts are high THC substances, but don't have a lot of inclusion of terpenes. That's not something that you'll find naturally. Of course, there's live resin that does have that inclusion of terpenes, but most of your standard distillate carts don't have that. So people find themselves slurping distillate carts pretty much daily because they feel like they're not getting the desired effect. And it is not the potency of the product itself, it's the fact that there's nothing behind it that is giving the catalyst to producing whatever effect it is that you want, but also prolonging it. And like you said, flower, because there is no way to change that. That's the most basic form. That's the fundamental form of cannabis. It is going to give you everything, and I think it's just difficult because some people don't want to move towards that.
Right.
They want to stick to, I don't get the smell. I don't have the smell. I don't have the look. I don't have that. I don't look like a pothead. I don't have that feeling. And that's what I mean by it being just a bit deeper. It's not just it's really like kind of based behind like the stigmas that cannabis has had for its existence essentially. So
I'm totally guilty. When I smelled someone in the past, I'm not saying that.
Right. Of course. Right.
That smelled like weed, instant judgment. And now I'm like, where's my people?
Yeah.
You know, it's a different type of look, but yes, and understanding it. But yeah, there is, I don't want to walk. I don't want to smell like smoke.
Right.
I don't want to walk into anywhere and be like, you know, because I'm a former smoker, like nicotine smoker, and I cannot stand the smell of cigarette smoke anymore. To me, it's offensive, and I don't want to offend people.
Right.
Like I don't want to, piss people off just by my presence because I smell like something.
Listen to that key word you said right there, offensive.
Yeah.
You know, you something that you figured that you used for whatever it was that you did. Mind you, no one has any prominence or control over your life, right? But the idea of you thinking that something that you used to benefit you or not, its presence alone can be offensive, is what I think a lot of people don't want either. They are under the same notion that if I have the smell that it's offensive.
Yeah.
And so, they move to other consumption options like edibles or vapes because they just try to avoid that altogether,
And I'm learning a lot, even just from you, what you were talking. I wasn't even thinking about the lack of other things behind prolonging the effects that you want.
Right.
I mean, if it's just THC distillate, and again, people don't understand, like distilled, it's distillate. When you distill alcohol, you're removing everything except the alcohol.
Exactly.
You're keeping
correct.
only the alcohol. So if you drink straight alcohol, you can. It's what is it called?
Like Everclear.
Thank you, Everclear, which is almost straight alcohol.
Yeah.
It tastes like crap.
It's horrible.
You're gonna get drunk off of a tiny little bit, but that's all you're gonna get. You're not gonna get any of the social, like enjoyable stuff out of it at all. Whereas, THC distillate, that's exactly it. You're getting pure THC. That's all you're getting. And then they have to add stuff to it to make it taste a certain way.
Exactly, yeah.
Instead of just leaving the plant as a whole. But again, I'm biased towards flower.
Yeah.
Like instead of just leaving the plant as a whole, and then you're getting all of the components.
Of course, yeah. So, I mean, and most of what they add is botanical, and it's not like it's like
fruits, flavors, cucumbers.
It's not natural terpenes, and those are unfortunately where they get a lot of people because it just gives off the same kind of like parallelism as like a nicotine vape, just fruity, it's flavorful, it's this and that, and I mean, of course, we see so many people now, like with nicotine vapes, because the idea of smoking cigarettes was that it didn't taste good.
Right.
So now that it
tastes like bubble gum.
Now it tastes good. It's something that I can do. And you hear people, I mean, even just from my experience as a bud tender, all the time would come in and ask me for vape pens, but they were like, I get one that doesn't taste like weed? If you're a bud tender, I know you've heard that before. I want a vape pen that doesn't taste like weed. And that idea is because you want the effects, but you don't want the flavor.
Right.
And you see the same parallelisms, but just the unfortunate reality is that from both of those flavors that you're getting is also not good for you either.
It's a chemical. It's a synthetic chemical.
Exactly, 100%. As much as the lack of terpenes is not good for you, that flavor is also not as good for you. So, yeah.
And I personally like the flavor of a good, tasty live hash rosin or something.
Right. Exactly.
I enjoy the flavor of a good grassy, weedy, piney type weed. Like I want my weed to taste like weed.
You should. I think you should. Like just, and that's for any stuff. Like it just should, because the inclusion of things that aren't natural are just not going to be beneficial for you.
It's not going to be beneficial. And I just like the flavor.
Yeah. Right. And I think it's an acquired taste like anything. Right?
Agreed.
Like you said, you didn't like the smell at one point. I mean, I remember before I smoked weed I didn't like the smell. I mean, a lot of people go through an experience where they didn't like the smell, but it's an acquired taste. After consuming over a period of time, you start to like that smell and that flavor. And it's almost like as if your body starts becoming in tune with terpenes. Like there are times where I just, like from personal experience, I'll go a period where like I'll smoke nothing but like flower, right? And then I'll move to concentrates and only smoke concentrates for a week or two. I'll go back to smoking flower and it'll taste like the very first time I smoked ever. It will be like the most very weedy taste, right? But over time, smoking that same eighth or how much I have, like I notice immediately that I start to smell more of the terpenes and taste more of the terpenes after a few days, because it's like it's almost like my tongue forgot. Like it's a weird way of describing it. When you switch between like different like consumption methods, and let me know if anyone else has ever experienced something like that. But I know that's something just for me. Like, and I think that's something that could be highlighted. But that's why I would say it's an acquired taste, because you have to build yourself up to getting those terpenes.
I think that also that just staying with the same flower and then switching the way you consume it will actually change the flavor. Have you ever used one of the vaporizers?
The herb vaporizers. Yeah, like a PAX. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I've never used a super cool high-end one. I've only used like $100 one that does okay. Right. That does decent. But that will like wake the flavors up.
Oh, yeah. Because you have to think about it temperature-wise.
Yeah.
It's at the same temperature that most terpenes are burning, which is like normally between like 375 to like 410 degrees. That parallels into why people love hash rosin and low temp dabs, because the low temp dabs are hitting the terpenes right at their boiling point, versus much higher than a boiling point. At that point, it's tasting burnt. It's tasting kind of crisp. Like, and that's how you kind of like disparage the two. I think that goes hand in hand, because terpenes burn at a certain temperature. They don't burn the same temperature as like how the flower itself burns, or how the concentrate itself burns. Like, so having it at a lower temperature activates a lot more terpenes. You get to receive a lot more terpenes, and I think that culture of low temperatures, it definitely makes like a huge difference. Whether it's dry herb, whether you're taking a dab, using a puffco, whatever it is, like understanding how temperatures work when you're using your cannabis can completely elevate the way you consume, like 100%. So I recommend it if you have not tried it.
Valid point.
Yeah.
Do you dab, Janae?
I have a pen that I'll occasionally hit. I haven't taken a dab in a long time, like legit one. They were just a little too high for, like, they got me too stoned, to be honest. Like, I love a good J. I love a good dab pen. But other than that, that's like the two I stick between. Edibles have never really worked on me. Like,
do you have a gallbladder? Have you ever had gallbladder surgery removal? Okay. So
unless it just disappeared in me.
Then you have a gallbladder.
Yes.
But people who have had gallbladder surgery.
Interesting.
It's something about whatever chemical that the gallbladder releases doesn't release, and then the body can't break it down into the 11-hydroxy. And then you could eat like 1,000 milligrams, and it's like
I feel like slightly toasted, like, but it never reaches like a peak.
Right.
Which is interesting.
And I love the fact that we've covered so many different topics and we're talking about them. And like one of the things for me personally is I have edibles, concentrate, and flower in the same strain. I just so happen to have them and it's from one company that I really enjoy. Said I'm not naming brands here. That's not what we're here for.
Trifecta.
All right, I've got the trifecta, and each one of those hit me differently. And when my back pain is at its worst, edibles, 100% edibles, and it leaves me clear-minded.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm going to go and take an IQ test on it or anything like that, but what I'm saying is like it leaves me clear-minded where it doesn't leave me stoned to the bone and on the ground.
Right.
So, but the different styles of consumption hit the body differently for everybody.
Yeah. It's because that absorption ratio is much different. They talk about absorption ratios for ingesting cannabis and for inhaling cannabis. It's almost double the amount. So, if you're ingesting cannabis, you're receiving double the amount of THC molecules versus inhaling it. Okay. And then you take those molecules that you've received, right, and then you combine them with the enzymes in your liver, and that's what creates the 11-hydroxy THC, which studies show could be 1.5 to 7 times stronger than a THC molecule. So
there's that purple dragon,
right? And so if you just do a little bit of math there, you're now absorbing more THC molecules, which are also being metabolized into a completely different substance that is stronger. So that's the reason why potency of edibles is so much different than inhaling cannabis, because you have a double entendre of receiving more molecules and then these molecules being metabolized into something that is essentially stronger than the initial molecule itself. And so, it's again a dangerous slope, as I mentioned.
And that's why when you mentioned don't take it like it's been an hour, like that window can be a long time. Like it can hit in maybe 20-30 minutes or up to 2 hours where you're at that peak. So I think that's super important to be aware of, because everyone's different, every metabolizes different, and I think that's really key to know.
And again, these seem like super simple, basic things, but for people who don't know and don't understand this, like nobody would take a Tylenol right now, which gets digested into your stomach and through your intestines, and expect it to work like that.
No.
But for some reason, they take an edible and they think, oh, I didn't feel something in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I guarantee you the Tylenol isn't working in the 5 minutes. You got to give it some time.
You know, I think it's funny because I think people just associate it with like the inhalation of cannabis and how immediate the effect is. So people assume the edible effect will be just as immediate. And no, it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily work like that because there is a process where it has to be metabolized and actually processed through your liver before you actually receive those effects. So
isn't there something different around like ingesting it versus like drinking it? There's something like it gets into your bloodstream quicker. I'm pretty sure, right?
There's like vessels under your tongue. That's the reason why people talk about sublinguals, tinctures. They even have like sodas that you can like drink and stuff too, which is different. It's going to affect you a little bit quicker, right? Well, yeah, and I just think that's like from like a matter like standpoint, like you're talking about like a solid being processed versus a liquid being processed. Of
course,
you're just probably more likely to have a faster effect from that. And now edibles are infused with nanotechnology. They have like nano THC, so it's emulsified, and that again increases the time in which you are having those effects, but then also like the time in which they start too. So like they're just going to start like a lot faster. So most brands have that label now that you'll see like nano.
Who reads the packages? That's
exactly
who reads the packages.
Yes,
I'm talking to one person right now.
Yeah.
So somebody. We have to take a quick 5-minute break.
Okay.
We're moving on from the entourage effects of cannabis and the different consumption methods and dosing and all that, and we're moving into something that ties into it a little, or we're tying it all up into the educational series about responsible usage, learning the differences and understanding. And I think that probably one of the biggest takeaways is going to be that the person needs to be armed to just learn.
Yep.
And ask questions.
Correct. And open to receiving the information. I think that's the big picture here is that we want to create impact, but one can only create impact to people who want to be impacted, if that makes sense.
Amen.
So you want to understand that if you want to learn more about cannabis, you want to be a part of this community, then there are certain things that you're going to have to take the time and take the effort and energy to understand and process. So you have overall a good experience. I think it's hard initially in the beginning because you may be influenced by what you've been told previously. You may be influenced by what you've seen on an article or what you've read. And there are a lot of people who are going to spread misinformation because they have a narrative or an agenda towards this product or
States government.
Yeah. Through a product or substance. But I think one thing that is important is that if you are serious about being a part of the cannabis community or even just trying cannabis for yourself and seeing where that benefits you, is that learning is going to definitely help. It's gonna benefit, but you have to be open to receiving the information.
There's a lot of misconceptions. There's 100+ years of misinformation by our own government, based on lies, based on racism, based on bullshit. So overcoming that when it's something that's been propaganda fed by a government into a more accepting place is going to be particularly challenging for the older community. So there's, you still have your elderly population that are still either conservative or grew up hippies.
Right.
They're still around.
Yep.
You know what I mean? We don't need to talk to those people that accept it and understand it. It's the ones who don't necessarily have the education, but do want to experiment with other things.
Yeah.
So, and again, one of the things that we discussed about kind of my fan base, I am law enforcement heavy. I do, and I have tons of law enforcement officers that email me talking about their departments and THC usage and this and that. So there is a growing curiosity, and this plays into the educational series of it all and explaining, the cultural differences and just the negative perceptions and all the different things that's been wrong and stigmatized about it. And that's kind of where this, again, tying in all this education information goes hand in hand into teaching the community. the rights and wrongs about it.
Yep. And that's all we want to promote simply. It's not any ulterior motives.
Right.
You know, this is just something that we all do as advocates. We all do as consumers. We all do as educators. We're all educators to some extent about this plant because we want people to understand. But having more precise, more accurate information, more transparent information is what we want to promote. And I think we're doing that here. And I think we'll do more of that once we blossom CannaEd into what it's going to be. It's very much in its infancy at this point in time. We've done 10 episodes so far. We've taken a little bit of break because holiday season is
right.
crazy. We all know. Again, this is something that we do on our own time. So we have our other jobs, our other lives, our things that we're doing. And we're going to get back to it. And this is the first start of it, being able to unwrap some of that you had seen and some of that you had watched on, the video so far, being able to unwrap that information. And we're going to translate it now into, how that works in a retail setting, and most importantly for ArizonaNORML, how you can become an individual who's involved and someone who could be a part of this cannabis community on a real level and make that impact and that change elsewhere, like for everyone. And so that's the reason why CannaEd, its slogan, education for everyone, because it is really for everybody. People who use cannabis, people who don't use cannabis, people who like cannabis, people who don't like cannabis. It's for every single person. We want people to just be aware so that if it is something that you want to experience, you can. If it's something that you don't want to experience, at least you have the information now. That's our idea. So,
amen.
Yeah.
And again, none of us are paid.
Right.
This is all advocacy that we do on our own. And this is the super cool part about where I'm stressing what ArizonaNORML is doing with members of the community and Canna educators such as yourself, and trying to draw out the community and come together and grow together.
Right. Yep.
And get 100%. Stronger and not be the stereotypical dude, and all the stereotypes, and to break that stigma.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's always been like my goal. Is I've always hated the way that people look at people who use cannabis and just the secrecy behind it. Like I think it's unfortunate, that people who have used cannabis for so long haven't been able to express themselves freely, and just been able to, show that this is not something that should be considered like other drugs, that other hard drugs that are, really creating detrimental effects on the people's lives. But this is something that actually helps people. This is something that actually can improve the quality of life for an individual. And, it's unfortunate that that's been skewed for so long, right? But we're doing the legwork now. We're,
right.
We're now being able to create like facilities and create organizations and create groups of people who are all like-minded and all understand, the purpose behind it, which is, being able to expand our community and just create the most positive environment, really. Like, that's what we want to do.
And we'll wrap this up here in a second. And like, one of the things is that the healing nature that is cannabis, I know it sounds hippie, it sounds cliche, it sounds whatever, but as someone who grew up in the military and law enforcement very conservatively and all that, emotions were not at the top of my list of things to talk about on a daily basis. Right. And it wasn't until I went through traumatic events and then found cannabis that I was actually able to overcome some mental things and actually get in touch with my feelings and emotions and start to understand who and what I am and stuff like that. And again, when you use this medicine as medicine with intention and purpose, it has a completely different effect in your life than just sitting around and using it just for recreation.
Correct.
And it has, when you use it for intention and purpose, and again, we're not saying anything negative about those who use it for recreation. That's not the point here. It's to highlight the positive effects of the medicinal side and to educate the public about that.
Right.
And I've seen such a dramatic positive impact in my life through the use of a plant-based medicine.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And again, just touching on your topic about recreational users, this is not to, judge or put placement on anyone who's using cannabis recreationally. If that's something that you do, that's awesome, because a lot of people do. People who still use cannabis medicinally also can use it recreationally. I think that's something that needs to be highlighted, is that it's not one or the other. Sometimes it's just a combination of both.
Yep.
And so understanding that is really important. I mean, for me personally, Nick Gasman, this social media journey that I've been on is initially started by just creating really good cannabis reviews. If you go on my Instagram now, you'll see a lot of cannabis reviews. That's where it's all started. But understanding that there was a bigger purpose behind what I was doing, which was cannabis education, and really, putting that to the forefront is what has started, what I do now. And so, yeah, I was 100% about the recreational side of it, and I'm still 100% about it now. And I just had to create a way to make that understanding plausible for everyone, and not just one side of it. No. The reviews were great, but that's only hitting one part of this audience, like the people who know about cannabis, the people who want to see, wow, that's some really good weed. And, those are all the people that I love. And that's those people who I started with.
I love those people.
And yeah, absolutely. And you'll see, on my Instagram and what I've done so far is a lot of that. But what you also will see is where that education journey started at the very beginning with, just a couple slides, couple images here and there, little explanations about things like that. And, kind of diving into it, and then where it's progressed, which is now with CannaEd and, all other things that you'll see. So, yeah, I want to make it, very clear for everyone who's just, smoking to smoke. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Keep doing what you're doing, and I hope you're smoking something good.
Right.
That's what I'm about. So
no more dirt weed. We're past those days.
We're done with that. Gas only. That's what it's about. So that's my slogan. That's my tag. Everyone should know it. Gas only the best.
Is there anything else you want to add? Because I think that was a fabulous stopping point right there.
Yeah, I think that was great, actually.